Hello, everyone, and thank you so very much for joining us again on this PB Virtual Beauty Week, and also with the first World Spa and Wellness online convention. These past few days, we've had panels about coping and hoping. What should we do? What should you do today with your spas, your salons, your operations, your teams, your invoices, saving up your cash? So we've covered all of that. Today is part one of two special panels, situation rooms, if you wish, about reset and restart. The world has hit pause very hard with 1/3 of the world population in lockdown. When will things start picking up? How can you plan your scenarios to reopen? These are the topics that today's panel with Andrew Gibson, Amanda Al-Masri, and Chris Kiefer will be touching on. With Mark Maloney and his team at Professional Beauty, I'm very, very impressed of the work that has been done, reaching out, sharing business advice, and taking your questions, because this is going to be a very interactive question with Chris, with Chloe on the line also. We will hear from you, but we will have right now 30 minutes with a few questions that we prepared with our panelists to go directly into the topic. So we have Andrew Gibson, Senior Vice President of Sensei Holdings, based in Santa Monica, California. Andrew, you used to be the Vice President for Wellbeing Luxury Brands at ACCOR Hotels, and you serve as the Chairman of the Wellness Tourism Association. So we will be touching on wellness tourism in just a second. Amanda, thank you so very much for joining us also in the US. Amanda Al-Masri, you are the founder of Al-Masri Consulting, and you did join us in London as one of our esteemed panelists when you were former Global Director of Spa Operations and Development for Starwood, and more recently, the former Vice President of Spa Services at Equinox. Chris, my friend, Chris Kiefer, founder and CEO of Rayya Wellness, and until recently, former CEO of Dreamworks Spas in the UAE. Thank you, Mark Maloney, also Managing Director of Professional Beauty, the one without whom we will not have been able to all meet and discuss. Before we dive right in and before Mark starts questioning with the panel, Andrew, please share with us your vision about wellness tourism and the different segments we see on TVs and recently about CNN that is even not recommending for people to travel.
Well, that's a very long topic in its own right, so I'll just try and hit on a few points that I want to get across. First of all, social distancing and segregation is not normal human behavior. So when we do get over the crisis and when we are safe to be able to travel again, I believe people will travel. They will want to socially engage. We heard it from Anna, I think yesterday, when she mentioned about the return to business in China. And we will see people wanting to engage. And wellness is a very, very good opportunity for them to be able to socially interact and to be able to have people massage them and touch them again. There will be a new normal in that. What that new normal is, I don't know, but there'll be all kinds of concerns about safety and hygiene and cleanliness that will come back, and that will affect the way that we do operate. And then the other point I think that's very, very important to note is it's likely, I believe, that most likely wellness travel will be primarily domestic initially. There will be places you can travel to easily and safely in your car or by a mode of transport that you feel comfortable with doing. And then over time, international travel will return and international customers will come back. I think it's really important to finalize on the message, really important and a golden opportunity for anybody involved in wellness to think how they are going to message to their customers of the future. What is going to be their message? Because wellness is something that people are going to seek, all of the different forms of wellness.
No, that's
Do you want more, or is
great
that
to
enough?
start with, and maybe we will touch on that again with the Q&A with the audience. Mark, would you like to kick off the session with the with the panelists and the different questions?
Anna, I know you were speaking beforehand about being in control when you want to return to normal business operations. And maybe you were suggesting it might be better to wait instead of quickly reopen. Do you want to elaborate on that? Amanda.
I believe Amanda is trying to get back in the situation. Maybe we can start with you, Andrew, because I know you wanted to touch on cash that is king and also talk about cash CPR. So in these unprecedented times of uncertainty, what would you recommend that operators do right now?
Well, just before I do start on that, I think, first of all, I want to thank you and Mark and the entire team for putting these panels together and for supporting the industry. I think that's a really important thing to do. And I think today, listening to the previous sessions that you've had, our aim today is to reaffirm strategies and plans that most listeners probably are already formulating. And I want to reassure everybody that they're not alone. And perhaps what we say today has got a few nuggets that either inspire you or provide a new perspective. So with that in mind, to your point, Jean-Guy, I think the style and response of our leadership is going to define those companies best positioned to succeed post-corona. And I think our own personal leadership, irrespective of the work we're doing and irrespective of what job you do, it's going to be vital in your ability to maintain your job. So I'm going to focus very much on leadership in the context of strategic planning. And I recognize that this time is very important. So my answers may be a little bit brief, but I'm happy to answer anything offline if people have further questions. So to come to your point, cash is king. I learned this in one of the very first companies I started with, a very small company in Oman that was expanding quickly. So here's a saying people can think about, and do think about this, please. Turnover is vanity. It sounds good. It doesn't put food on the table. Profit is sanity. That keeps your shareholders and your banks happy a little bit longer. But cash is reality. That pays the bills, it keeps the staff, and it puts food on your table. So let's focus on cash. And I think most companies today need a little bit of CPR, whether you're a mega corporation or a family-run business. So what is CPR for cash? Well, the first one is communication. You've heard it before with other people, but communicate, both up and down the line. Be transparent and be honest. Everybody's in the same boat now. Everybody knows the situation. It's not as if this is a one-off and you've got to go and argue to your bank or to your employees. Everybody's in the same situation. So communicate to your owners, your directors, the banks, the landlords, everybody, and help negotiate and reorganize and restructure. Plan. We don't know how long this is going to last. Hopefully, we find solutions more quickly than the latter. But do you have a 3-month and a 6-month and a 9-month plan in place? We don't know how long it will last. And have you got contingencies for each scenario so that you're able to answer questions, whether that's from your paymasters or whether it's from your employees? For example, we've talked about voluntary pay cuts rather than redundancies. We're on a global seminar today, so I can't answer specifics on each particular country, but please make sure you're well informed of what's happening in your location. You understand what entitlements you've got, whether that's from governments paying out in terms of rent, salary support, whether there are non-eviction notices on your rents and so on. Be in control of it and be able to answer any questions, which means you need to ask questions to find the answers to. And the last one of CPR is react. Don't sit idle. This is the time to be positive, to plan and to respond and to repair. Time to negotiate with everybody. I think this is a new opportunity, and it's another acronym I'll come to later, but it's your flight to Mars. This is your flight to Mars. It's a new venture and a new opportunity, and we'll touch on that later.
I think that's a really good start. Thank you, Andrew. Amanda, before we go to Mars, you had some ideas, I think, before in terms of perhaps people waiting to kickstart and holding back a bit. Do you want to elaborate on that?
I do, because I think it's an important conversation to have. I know that everyone's really eager to get back out the door, reopen doors, get employees working again. But I think just because you can open doesn't necessarily mean you should. I think everyone needs to take this moment, as Andrew just said, and really evaluate and understand. And really there's kind of two buckets of consideration here. The when and the why of when you open, and then the how, right? The how is the piece I think all of us are going to be a bit more comfortable with, right, as operators. But the when and the why, I think, are the hard questions that you need to sit and answer. And unfortunately, there's really no way to do it other than by doing some financial modeling and some strategic planning, as Andrew just alluded to. So first, the when and the why, figure out why you need to reopen, why you want to reopen. And it's probably a combination of things, right? It probably is partially because you need to, right, to get money coming in the door. It might also be because you want to get your team working, but it might also be because you have to, right? You're part of a hotel and the hotel is reopening and they're asking you to open your doors as well, so these services are available to guests. And then you also need to balance that against the financial reality, right? How much, and understanding what your financial reality is. How much does it cost you to operate every day? How much does it cost you from a cost of sales perspective if you start discounting? Are you going to make money? Do you know what your margins are? It's asking yourself these questions and understanding what that reality looks like. And then consider really and truly what your operational reality looks like. And I know we're going to talk about this a bit later, so I'll leave that part. But figure out what that looks like for you specifically, and really how you're going to need to change it. And once you've answered some of those questions, you need to start doing some financial modeling. And as Andrew mentioned, you're looking at your 3, 6, and 9 month plan, but really even just looking at a pre-opening date, just like draw a line in the sand and say, okay, if we open at this time, what's the best, worst, and likely case scenario? Those 3 scenarios, plan for those. Meaning, if things go really wrong, how long can you pay your payroll? How long can you pay your rent? If things go really well, how quickly can you ramp and get staff trained and back in the spa and ready to work? So really having that plan together ensures that that you're ready and you're prepared, and you, again, using your time wisely, as Andrew just said. But I really do think that figuring out what it looks like when you reopen is going to be one of the more important things, because it's not going to be status quo. And figuring out, when you can do what you want to do when you open is another way to sort of perceive this. But like Andrew said, I think this is not the time to sit idle. This is the time to start planning. And if you aren't comfortable with financial modeling, seeking help from somebody, even outside your industry, that can help. But unfortunately, I don't think this can be done without some real digging, some real planning, some real thought leadership from our team side.
Thank you, Amanda. Before we get back,
Amanda, follow up very briefly.
Okay.
Sorry, Jongi.
Okay, Mark.
Amanda, just to follow up, there are going to be owners there. Clearly, we hear that it might not be financially advantageous to open straight away, but clearly, after a period of absence, if I'm allowed to open, there's going to be owners say, I want to open come what may, because it will take time, as Andrew's alluded to for the customer to come back. So surely people will be just saying, I'm going to open quite a while, even if I'm not necessarily making money.
Yeah, and you need to,
what would you say?
I would say, look, you need to balance that with our financial reality, right? If it's going to cost you more to have your team there and rostered, however it is you decide to do that, to have these additional costs associated with not just keeping your space, right? Not just paying your rent, but actually operating your spa, balancing that against what you think is likely. You have to know how long you can keep going, right, if you're losing money. And that's when I said the best, worst, and likely case scenario. Look at your worst case scenario. How long can you keep going if you're losing, what you think is probably the worst amount of money you could be losing? Meaning, can you keep your doors open and pay your payroll for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months? And if you can't, what's your plan? Can you get a bank loan? Can you max out credit cards? Can you go to the owner for more money? all of this really comes down to not just having a business plan, not just understanding where you think things are going to go, but really having contingency plans. And I think those are really scary, very uncomfortable conversations for people to have if they're the owner, with themselves or with their owners or with their general managers or whoever they report up to. But they're conversations you need to have, because unfortunately, for better or worse, spa is a fairly low margin business. And the difference between making money and losing money, particularly in times like these, it's not a big difference, right? So if you are over,
so we need to have those.
What's that?
We need to have those conversations now. Is what you're saying, and start thinking about that right now, and have the difficult conversations up front now before we're faced with them. Sorry, over to you, Jean-Guy.
Thank you, Mark. I completely agree with you, Amanda, when you talk about cash and how we need to manage it. Also, you, Andrew. Interestingly enough, the topic of the Global Wellness Summit in November will be Think and Act Like a Startup. Any startup, any small company that is not sure of its revenue stream, wishes, has a patent, has a product, has a service, wants to launch it to a certain market, national or international, they know how much they will burn every month to have the business open, the rent, the team and everything. So all of you listening, look at your cash, just like gas you would put in your car. How long can you drive? How far can you go with that? And you need to assess every single opportunity, especially with what the government can or cannot give. All governments are now promising the moon. How far to the moon can you go? So this is really important. I'd like to pass the mic now to Chris in Dubai, because most recently, Chris, you had 23 or 25 spas that you were supervising. Now you have 2 with Rayya. Still, I believe you had to close them both.
Absolutely.
Are you as strategic as Andrew and Amanda on when to reopen, and what can spa operators do right now?
I mean, look, obviously we all don't have a choice, right? We had to close down all the operation, and the situation here is fairly bad at the moment. We're all on lockdown and sanitizing the entire city, and the situation is really bad. But there is things that we can do now. Obviously, you know, we have staff sitting in the staff accommodation, pretty much doing nothing. So we have to keep them entertained, and we have to keep them on their toes, because we know they will, you know, keep themselves busy for 1 week, 2 weeks, but what's happening then? We have to keep in mind the staff is our biggest asset. And this critical time now can stretch, like Andrew said. We don't know how long this will take. You know, it can take 2 months, it can take 3 months, it can take 1 month. We don't have a crystal ball that will predict how long the staff will be sitting idle with no work. At the moment, they're on unpaid leave, but how can we keep them busy? So what we do at the moment is we have actually shifted all our used laptops that we had to the staff accommodation, distributed them to the different apartments, and we have come up with training plans that we're doing remotely over Zoom. So twice a week, we're doing retail trainings with the staff, which we honestly never had the time to go into that much detail, but we feel like now really they're taking it in, and we can really follow up a lot more than what we used to do in the past.
Chris, sorry,
not only that.
Sorry, Chris. How you got 2? Is it an hour a week? How long are you spending? There are 2 sessions. How long is each session?
Oh, it's an hour. It's normally not longer than that, because, you know, normally my meetings and trainings, they don't take longer than an hour, because then the stuff's starting to switch off anyway. So I think we should keep it as compact and concise as possible. I think it's enough to do it twice a week for 1 hour. But look, if you have more time as a leader to do it, obviously, you know, the more the merrier, and the longer time.
And stuff that you created specifically for this time, are you doing it as you go now?
Yes. I mean, we have a lot of time to spend at home. So I think all of us now can really go deep and can really, you know, prepare these sessions. I was listening in other panels where it was said in big organizations that will be a problem. But I have to disagree with that, because you can connect with HR, you can involve your ops managers, you can involve your supervisors to assist you with these trainings. And yes, they might be on unpaid leave, but now is the time to show commitment. Now is the time to show really that they're in the same boat and that they're accepting this crisis as what it is. And we need to adapt and we need to be flexible. Another thing.
How's the feedback been amongst your team? How's the feedback been, do you feel?
Oh, it's tremendous. I mean, like, obviously, you know, I've just a month ago opened another outlet, a new outlet. I have a complete new team in that particular outlet, and they're very eager to learn and they're very receptive, and it's been taken very well. And it's not only the brain part that we focus on. We also have trainings and kind of competitions going on for the fitness side. So we're doing like challenges, do 100 burpees, nominate this person to do it next. We have WhatsApp groups where they're sharing their videos, and all of these things will be continuing on until this crisis is over, because we need to keep them occupied. That's the only way forward. So there is things that we definitely can do in order to keep the staff engaged at the moment.
Absolutely. Mark, just a quick mention before you go with the next question with Andrew about flying us to Mars. Yesterday, I was sitting on a call with Susie Ellis, Nancy Davis, and about 50 people from the Global Wellness Summit. And Susie did mention something that is very similar to what Chris is saying just right now. Everyone is talking about social distancing. If you walk in the streets, there's a lot of space between two people shopping or just walking. We do not need social distancing. We need more social proximity. We need more ways to engage them through these sessions or Zooms or calls or WhatsApp groups. We need physical distancing, yes, but we need more social proximity to work our way through this all together. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Junkie. Andrew, MARS is an acronym. Spell out what it means.
Well, I think the reason I chose Mars is because it's a new opportunity, a new venture, a new thing to aim for. So using the acronym of Mars, the first word M is to motivate. This is really an important time for leaders to be positive, to show confidence, to encourage new ideas, explore opportunities. Really important, because employees are very concerned. There's a whole bunch of stresses in their life. Their future, their salary, their families, their health. So motivation is absolutely key. Second thing, A, is for analyze and activate. You have to know your information, whether that's the data or whether that's whether you can get support from various different agencies. You have to be able to analyze, and it's a great opportunity to actually do some internal analysis of your business. We often have all of the data there, and because we're so busy, we do the cursory check over of the important pieces of data, such as the most popular activities and the most popular or most profitable activities. But we can do a deeper dive here, really have a look at that and really work out what is making your business successful and which parts of it are just a waste of time. R is for reassure. Not only do you motivate, but you reassure people with open communication, with very well thought out contingency plans, definite action that you are going to take, and be able to communicate that both to the people that are going to continue to pay you, but also to the people that you are responsible for. And you need a calm, positive approach to the future. That will reassure people. And then S is to stimulate. Reassess your current business. Use that data. Review your employee productivity, create a plan and stimulate activity. Reaching out to your customers. The big advantage to you is you know your customers. Online, which is a massive growth business right now, on online fitness, online yoga, online training, they're really big business, but they don't know your customers. They're trawl fishing. They're throwing a net out and hoping they get as many people as they can. You know your customers, so reach out to them. Keep them loyal to you. Get them engaged. So that's what Mars is.
Thank you very, very much, Andrew.
Would you like to carry on?
Thank you. I was on mute. Amanda, you are now a consultant, but when you were in charge of spa operations and development for Starwood, when you were also in charge of spa services for the brand new brand Equinox, You were very, very strong on brand equity and data mining. And I've heard so many times over and over spa operators say, man, I have no time for that. I'm deep into the daily operations, the daily grind. I cannot do and mine as well as I would like my data. And brand equity, you know, we launched, we're there, we're on the track, we do the best we can. Isn't that the best time of all to reflect on that, Amanda?
It is. It's hard, you know, when you're trying to keep the lights on in a daily operation, it's really hard to sit down and really try and figure out not only what the data is telling you, but also where you want to go. So, you know, Andrew's, you know, made a very, you know, a statement I agree with, which is now's the time to really dig into your data. So I won't spend too much time on that. But I think, you know, the biggest point that I'd like to make, and that I often see people sort of going, you know, veering off the path with, is know what your point of view is, right? Concept or, you know, brand, that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But what is it that you do? What is it that's meaningful to your customers? What is it that makes you different than the spa across the street or in the next country? And even within, if you're part of a brand, what makes your spa unique to other spas within your brand? So really know who you are and what you're doing. And you know why that's meaningful, particularly now, is because you're going to have to make a lot of strategic choices, and you're going to have to make a lot of decisions. And some of these decisions are not decisions you're going to want to make. You're going to have probably more limited marketing budgets. You're probably going to have constraints on how much time you spend on doing brand-driven activities once you reopen, right? Because you're going to be putting out fires and pivoting. So now's the time to really think and set a plan. And the one thing that I can really point out is once you feel like you've gotten your arms around that, who we are and what you're doing, make sure you don't deviate. Or if you do, make sure you're deviating for the right reasons. And I'll give you one example because I think it happens an awful lot. We're going to, you know, there's going to be a conversation about discounts, and I think we'll even talk about it more on this panel. But, you know, discounting is something I've been hearing a lot about and people asking a lot of questions, right? Everything, you know, hotel operators are also talking about, is this the time where we reduce our average daily rates and look at that? Spas are in the same boat, right? If you are a spa that has been heavily reliant on discounts, on promotions, on things like Groupon, now is not the time to make the stand and say, no more discounts for us, right? As Andrew just said, you know your audience, right? If that audience is expecting you to do that, you should probably continue to discount, right? That's what they're going to be expecting your response. If you don't do that, or you haven't historically done that, think twice about doing those discounts. And the reason for that is a brand equity. It's a brand equity decision, right? You can decide that we'll do that for the short term, but find other ways around it. I know we'll have this conversation a bit later, but that's just an example, right? Know who you are and what you're doing, and stay true to that. And you know, I think it's an interesting time for people to be considering this, because you're going to have to, as I said, make some of these tough decisions, and you need to make those with this in the background.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Andrew, what do you think about? I've always believed, and it's all very well in theory, that we should try and add value rather than cut prices. But would you have any practical ideas on that? And I'll ask the same question, Andrew first, and then Chris as well for you too.
Oh, well, first of all, let me give you a story about the 2008 crash. Remember the financial crash of 2008? And Las Vegas got a double whammy, because not only did it have that incredible financial crash, but President Obama at the time said that Las Vegas was Sin City and people shouldn't be going there in these times of austerity. So one particular hotel, not one of the ones I worked for, but it was a great case study to look at, decided to slash their prices from $599 a night to $99 a night. That process cost them $25 million in repairs, because the customer that comes for $99 is not their normal customer. The customer that comes for $99 is saying, wow, this is fantastic. They go to the hotel and they end up with lots and lots of souvenirs that they take, including unscrewing things that are screwed to the wall and walking out with them. And that customer is never going to go back there. So that customer is a one-off strategy. Secondly, you've now destroyed the customer base that you had, because they're going to say, I'm not going to go to that hotel if they're having $99 rates. That's not my rate, and they don't come back. And so not only did it cost them $25 million in repairs, they lost the very business that they were working with prior to the crash, and they took over 3 years to get that back. So if you do discount, if you're going to go into that game, I really caution you to think about it carefully. And as you know, I'm not a big lover of discounting anyway. So I believe that actually you sell on value. And what I mean by that is, if you're offering a 60-minute massage, maybe you'll put in a manicure on top of it, or you'll add in a small gift or something like that. You sell on value. And that's going to retain your customer base and allow you to keep your prices, and eventually you can return back to your normal services. The other thing I think, and it comes back to this online as well as actually in service, and that's differentiate between experience and commodity. That's really important. What do I mean by that? Well, if you are going to go online and you're going to put things online, as I mentioned earlier, you know your customers. So you are creating experiences for them. Experiences are getting an emotional attachment to you and your company and your people and your services. And that's a really important point to differentiate. If you're just going to sell on price, it's a commodity, and you'll have plenty of competition in that arena that will challenge you on price, and it can be a spiraling down. Whereas experience gives value to you, what you're doing, to your people, and that is going to retain your customers. I think Erica mentioned that really importantly with yesterday when she talked about Casa Ignacia. And one of the things I particularly liked that she mentioned, it's a small thing, but this is experience. I think what she was sending out pepperoni pizza or something to her customers. She had some little
pasta and sauce.
Homemade
absolutely.
Pasta.
Yes.
Homemade. Yeah, no, a little simple thing, but that's touching an emotional engagement with your customers. Yeah,
Chris.
So I'm a great believer in having value.
Chris, what would you add on this?
Well, I have one for you, and I'm sure that Frank would love that one. Dynamic pricing is the answer for me. I mean, like I've been talking about this last year already at one of the panels at the summit. We should go into this airline approach and really look at your off-peak and main peak time pricings, because there will always be people who will be paying full in your peak times, and this is the ones that we should be focusing on. And if you have your Groupon and your Coupon and your discount focused people, they will come in the off-peak times, so you can really distribute the costing this way, and the pricing should be done the same way. So I think this is what we should focus on, is dynamic pricing. Another thing that we should focus on.
I totally agree with that. Chris, I totally agree with dynamic pricing. That's not discounting. That's been a sensible use on selling a time commodity that dissipates if you don't use it. I agree entirely.
So for me as well, when we will reopen, another thing that I will focus on, I've already set the measures in place, is to first of all focus on your loyal guests, and the ones that really know your pricing, before you focus on new client acquisition and maybe get into this whole discount. Should I not focus on your clientele that is coming to you regular? Your regular guests know your pricing, and they will be paying the full check right at the beginning. So keep in touch with them now and re-invite them when you do the reopening, and just wait, just hold on for 1 month, 2 months, and then start doing the acquisition of new clients, if you can manage to do that financially, obviously. But we will talk about that later as well.
Well, we don't have too much time, unfortunately. I think we're already, we've only got about 7-8 minutes left. But Chris, could you tell us, what do you think you'll change your business models, and will you look at it how will you look at things differently when eventually you do open?
Well, I think there's a few things that will change. One of the things I think Andrew talked about that briefly is the fact that the scales will have to be very balanced in terms of risk. So now is the time really to negotiate your conditions with your landlords, with your owning companies. I think many conditions that are set on rent and lease can be moved into revenue shares, for example. And I think this is the time really where the owning companies need to be extremely flexible and where the risk needs to be very evenly spread out. I think this is one of the most important messages that I would like to bring across. Obviously, we will see the whole discount wave going through the city, but that is a different scenario. You know, I think what you should focus on at the moment is really to look at the negotiations with your owning companies, to look at rent, to look at lease, to work out better conditions for you, because everybody will be flexible in that regard. Another thing which I would like to mention is the barter agreements that you could set in place, because now obviously people will not have the big budgets to spend anymore, but you probably have a great service to offer. So the things that did not work out in the past, where the people were like, oh no, I don't want to do barter and I don't want to, you know, work with cashless exchanges. Now is the time to reopen these discussions. Talk to the radio stations, talk to the TV stations. We, for example, we have an exclusivity deal now with Fitness First, which is only based on barter, and our ads are running in the entire Fitness First group, visible to thousands of members with a cashless barter agreement. These things will become more and more possible now as we go into the after crisis mode. So that's
have you tried? I think that's a great idea, Chris. Have you tried with any radio stations or any media locally in Dubai?
Well, I think
or is that too early? Yeah.
Now, exactly. Now, I would say it's a little bit too early, but partnerships will become very important. Unfortunately, here in Dubai, in the last 2 years, it was not so much about partnerships anymore. It was all about the bottom line and cash. I think this mindset will definitely change, and partnerships will become more valuable. Affiliations will become more important, and you should leverage on that. You should definitely leverage on that. Looking at your marketing as well, wherever you can go cashless, go cashless. This is the most important point.
I've had a question online from an Amanda Lee, who wants, can you clarify what you mean by dynamic pricing and give an example?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's very simple. Look at the airline.
Okay.
Right?
Go ahead.
If you're looking at the airlines, then this is the answer. It's a very short answer. Look at what the airlines are doing. If you go online, you book a flight on Wednesday, it's going to be a different price than if you book it on the weekend. Simply put.
So if I can expand on that, because Mark and I believe Amanda Lee, it's a great question. We had a panel 2 years ago with Frank Pizzikalis from Resort Suite, also the chairman of the iSpa Foundation, and Garrett Metzberger, the chairman of iSpa, was there also. They talked about not only dynamic pricing for spas, but also dynamic availability. Very rapidly, and I hope one day we can take the audio podcast of that and share it. Dynamic pricing is just as Chris said. Why would you charge on slow times the same price as you would charge on high times? For instance, some day spas or hotel spas are much more busy on weekends, and they have slower days on weekdays. A lot of spas have now prices for weekends with $10 or $15 more on regular services that they do on the weekdays. But because it's a weekend, they have those weekend prices. And they say that if people come on the weekdays, then they pay less than on the weekends. So weekend prices are now their new normal. And weekdays, especially on low days, they reduce to where they were before. On top of dynamic pricing, a lot of spas are now adding dynamic availability, which is some of their treatments are only available on weekdays and other treatments are only available on weekends. An example of that, Caudalie used to be one of the finalists in France and near Bordeaux. They have a very successful hotel, especially on weekends, and they were one of the finalists of the World Spa and Wellness Awards. As a judge, I went there and I realized that on weekends, you cannot choose what type of treatments you're going to get because you're there on the weekend. You decided to come then on that time. The only thing they can offer is a package, and you must have the massage, but before you have the scrub and before you have the bath with some wine elements in it, so that you have that experience. The last thing that I'll say, on top of dynamic pricing, dynamic availability, very quickly, is think signature. Now is the time when everyone has time to think, and I'm going to pass it over to Amanda in a second, so she can unmute herself right now. The idea is, do not copy what others are doing. Ask your team what sets their hearts on fire. What are they great at? What are they the best at? So that when you reopen, you have amazing signature experiences for facials, for massage, for maybe emotional guidance, emotional mental health, where you can have group sessions with people, or you can help them do what you do best, so that you don't have to discount when you do what you do best. And as you reopen first, relaunching these signature elements with your most loyal clients, so that they can be your ambassadors and they can talk to their friends and they can cope with them. Amanda, back to you. I'm going on mute.
I just have a couple of learnings, having done this in a few instances. And first of all, from a really tactical standpoint, this is fairly easy to implement. I know it can seem a little bit overwhelming, right? You're not creating an airline. That's a perfect example, Chris, but that you're not necessarily creating an airline model where there's 95 different iterations of pricing a day. It's typically weekend, weekday, or peak or off-peak pricing. So all of that can typically be supported by a spa software system, and you can do it both online and offline, right? So it's fairly practical to implement, very easy to implement. What I would say is a lot of clarity is needed when you implement this, right? There can be a little bit of a bump in the road if you have a big group of existing clientele. They may resist this. Many often love it. What I would say is, what I've learned is, I would keep the pricing you have now, let that be the peak pricing, and reduce pricing for the off-peak, rather than increase pricing for peak and then work from there. Otherwise, it's a really big kick in the shins to your existing clientele, and there's a lot of resistance to implementing this process. So just a practical learning that I've had in the past with this, but I agree. I think this is where the world is going.
Thank you, Amanda. I think people also need to think long term. We're just we have to transfer dates, and we're in negotiation with a hotel group, and I'd love to mention, and they want to charge us 25% more for moving dates. And we negotiated, and we feel very strong. They are destroying any goodwill. So they may win this battle now, or they may not, but we will never, ever, ever do business with that group after this situation is out. So I think people need to be mindful that people have memories. We as business having to take tough decisions with staff, but I want to be able to look somebody in the eye and know that, at least in my head, I've tried to do my best and be straight and be honest. And so when I see him or her in the pub in 6 months' time, whether they're an employee or not, that I felt I've done the right thing. And I think businesses who don't do that, in some respects will have memories as consumers, and some respects you'll never forget. So I think they should be mindful. Andrew, I don't know if we've just lost you, but
I'm still here and I can hear you.
Good. What about, I'm going to change the tack a little bit. We've got a little bit more time. What do you think about providing online content to clients and members?
I think that you have to be careful. Obviously, the current people that are providing it have got the resources and the professionalism to be able to go with online content. And then there's a lot of home-baked things that are coming across. and you can very quickly see the difference between something that's professionally done and something that's been done on a shoestring budget, or just as a in the kitchen kind of activity. So if you are going to go online, you need to first of all test it out and make sure that you're comfortable with what you put in, that it does reflect your company and reflect the values of your company, and it's pertinent to your customer base. I think those are the really important things. I believe we're already seeing the effects of the increased level of online content in the arena of wellness. That was happening actually prior to coronavirus. It's just accelerated right now, and that is going to continue to stay. You've seen also the rise of equipment such as Pelotons, Tonal, and Mirror, which are all focused on doing exercises inside the house, and then using the phrase at the start of this about socially participating. Of course, you're socially participating with a bunch of strangers online. So it's here to stay. If you're going to do it well and understand your customers and understand why you're doing it.
Thank you very much. As Mark said, we have 10, 15 more minutes, because apparently the next session, and thanks for us, is going to start on Instagram. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I think we've got maximum of 10 minutes, Jean-Guy.
Excellent. I'd like to ask a quick... Okay, go ahead.
Well, I think, Mark, if I can just touch on something you've made, because I can see you're obviously going through tremendous personal anguish in having to make some really tough decisions, and you're not alone. Everybody's doing that, and for the smaller companies that thrive on cash flow, it's a really difficult decision. So we're all here to support each other and help. But I want to also let people that are listening to this understand, sometimes you have to make that decision, and you have to make a decision that may be the end of your business. It may actually be that. It's better to work through and have proper plans in place, proper contingencies, and work through all the different scenarios so that you're able to make those tough decisions sooner rather than later, because they get much worse and more painful the later you do them. So I think it's really important to do that.
I think it's very easy to bury your head in the sand. And I think you've got to the earlier you make the decisions, the better. And the earlier, I think, Chris, I think actually all the panelists have said, Amanda too, is to have the conversation with your stakeholders, the people you owe money to, your staff, your team, your customers, the people you owe money to, or your early as possible. And I think, when we are talking to customers who have had difficulty over the years, it's the silent ones, the ones that refuse to talk to you, are you're most anxious about. You might not like it if a customer says, I can't pay you now, but X, but at least he or she's talking to you. And I urge everybody to not bury their heads in the sand.
The other thing I would like everybody to be reassured is that we are supporting each other. We don't know how long this is going on, but we are here to help and to support and answer questions and try to work solutions out for this.
Absolutely. I believe this is not the time for wishful thinking and hoping for the best. You have to make peace with everything that comes your way. And in previous sessions, it really was about having scenarios, not just one strategy.
Correct.
We have a menu, we have a price listing. We're just going to reopen. We still have those products on the shelves. We're still going to sell them. And that's it. I mean, we reopen as fast as we can because we need to get those products moving on our shelves. And we have people and they need to get massaging. What if social distancing is putting more pressure on hygiene? What is social distancing is requesting to change the standard operational procedures? There are 4 startups, again, who are very quick, as Amanda said, to pivot. At times of uncertainties are times of challenge. And Andrew, you know more than better than anyone, having worked with Chinese people, having lived over there, that the way they write challenge is the same way they write opportunities. So be aware that sometimes it's great to know where to enter a market, when to enter, and sometimes you need to know when it's time to exit a market or pivot. And this is not time for wishful thinking, but definitely for strategic planning. As Mark said, we have just a few more minutes. As we conclude, all of us, could I ask for all of you a short vision of what the new normal in your eyes will be when we reopen in a few weeks or a few months? What's the new normal for you, Amanda, and then Chris, and then Andrew?
Tough question to answer quickly. I think it's two things, right? It's figuring out what your operational reality is, one, and two, it's remembering that we're a business of people, right? Connecting people with other people. So it's time, as Chris and Andrew both said, really to be focused on having emotional intelligence, having that EQ, and spending time to lead your team, to figure out how to get them back to the new normal, and to make sure that you have a cohesive team culture, you have a operation that's working from the inside out. It's not just about, even though I've been the one talking about all the financial stuff, it's not just about the finance and the plan. Ultimately, that's the backbone of your operation, which is really people.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I can only support Amanda's statement, and I think it's now really, like I said earlier, the time for solidarity. And I think after this crisis is over, I know we're always saying everything is going to go back to normal, but it will not go back to normal, and we will have to focus on new ideas. We'll have to open up new revenue streams, and it's not like easy anymore sending an email and saying, here it's $500, can I please have this and this marketing activity activated? You will have to go out and you will have to build some new affiliations that really, really drive business. Think out of the box. I think this is the most important thing that will change. The old ways will not work as good anymore, and we have to open up new ways. And I wrote down a little closing remark, which is just very, very, very straight to the point sentence. Minimize financial risk by working resourceful and leverage on partnerships with win-win solidarity. Keep your top performers happy, the team's morale up, and stay optimistic. Be braver than ever with innovative ideas to open up new revenue streams. I would say that sums it up.
Andrew?
Well, I think Chris has done a very good job there summing it up. So I difficult to add. Here's what I'll do, and here's where I'll go. First of all, I think that if ever this crisis has taught everybody the value of relationships, if you're renegotiating and you've not had a good relationship with your bank manager, or you've not had a good relationship with your stakeholders, then you are going to find negotiation a lot more difficult than if you do have a good relation. So it really is a good lesson for everybody in making sure that you communicate upwards and downwards continuously. So what is the new normal? What is the new normal? Well, if I had a crystal ball and I was able to foresee that, I'd probably be a very wealthy man by now. So I'll have an attempt. I think we've already been seeing a transition from what was the spa industry into the wellness industry, and that's happening in hotels, it's happening in private companies, it's happening in the rise of destinations, and so that will continue. It may be far more domestic to initially as people get back to business, and then they'll venture out further as they feel more comfortable. For sure, there's going to be a whole new regime and rules and sets on how we physically interact with each other. And I suspect that we'll see some of those come through in the spas and the actual areas where we have to touch and people. I hope that doesn't destroy the emotional, physical engagement that is actually vital to the industry that we do. But for sure, I expect to see some restraints coming in there. And I do believe society is going to be seeking wellness more than ever, simply because they've been socially segregated from each other. And whilst Jean-Guy mentioned at the beginning about social participation, great, but that doesn't replace actually being able to hug somebody, to be able to touch somebody, to be able to socialize with your friends and with your family. And that means that wellness will have a big role to play. It's just how we message that in a sincere and genuine way. And I'll finish there.
Andrew, as somebody who has connections with Sweden, I will ask an off-field question, since we're not so time pressured. What do you think about what's going on there? Because they've taken an outlier route, haven't they? They're not, for those who don't know, Sweden haven't got the rigid lockdown that most of us in the rest of the world, certainly in the West, have. Do you have a view on that? Or is that a bit unfair?
It's a little bit unfair. I don't live there, but what I can surmise, first of all, Sweden is a country 3 times the size of the United Kingdom, with a population of 9 million, less than the population of London. So their density per population is a lot less, even in the big cities of Gothenburg and Stockholm. Secondly, Swedes are tremendously pragmatic and take a very democratic view and do a lot of data research before they do anything. So they will have studied and they will have seen and weighed up the different impacts on society. So I can't really comment much further than that, but I know that they will not have taken that in a flippant way. They will have taken that in a very calculated and logical way.
Oh, that's interesting. I would just like to add, in terms of, clearly, people are saying, oh, things will come back and things will not come back. People will be different. I think the issue for me is, I think we'll be desperate to interact. It's very difficult when we're on lockdown to see past it, but I think we'll be desperate to interact. But that desperation will be tempered by a lot of us not having the money to do so. So I think, that there will be a balance on that. Certain markets will be more cautious. We heard yesterday from Anna that some of her spas in China are opening, and they have 50% occupancy, which I thought was very encouraging. Your point about more domestic, potentially, but I think it will be more of, I think people, once we're allowed back, will be wanting to, with the normal health precautions and upped sanitation, will be desperate to interact and have the treatments. But there will be financial issues, and I think we need to be very clever and cautious on not doing what that hotel in Vegas did, because you're not attracting the right customer. You're slashing your market anyway. But
so, Mark, I as you know, I've got global connections, and I was very keen to see what the real situation is in China, not the stuff that we receive on the news. And I was particularly interested in how the independent small businesses are surviving in China, because obviously the United States and the United Kingdom are doing these government bailouts and guaranteeing salaries and all of the kind of things like that. So what actually happens in China, and I wrote to a friend of mine that actually owns several companies in China, and it's desperate for the small independent operators, because China's built around supporting state operations, state enterprises, and they don't have a safety net. And I think that's a grim fact and a grim reality, is that many small independent business, irrespective of what bailouts and what support you're going to get, will fail. And that's why I'm kind of reiterating to everybody here, do your research, do your data, and have a very strong, hard look at everything that you're doing to be able to make informed decisions that are going to protect yourself and your family, your employees, and however. And that comes back to the very first thing of CPR, communication.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, Andrew Gibson, Amanda Al-Masri, Chris Kiefer, and our host, Jean-Guy de Gabriac. We could have carried on. We've gone over an hour, would you believe? We were only supposed to have 45 minutes. I think I could have quite happily carried for 2 hours. So I'm going to ask some of you to come. Well, I'm going to ask you all to come back again, perhaps in a couple of weeks' time, because I think that was a great session on behalf of us all here at Professional Beauty, thank you very much. And I hope everybody watching has enjoyed it as much as I have. So thank you.
Thank you very much to the team. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you.